On December 9, 2019, the Embraer E175-E2 completed its maiden flight out of São José dos Campos, Brazil. The E175-E2 is the smallest aircraft in the Embraer E2 family, which itself is a full MAX/Neo-like engine update to its highly popular regional jet series. The E175-E2 can seat up to 90 passengers in a single-class configuration and is the third and smallest variant of the E2 family, following the E195-E2 and the E190-E2. The E2's fuselage is 60 centimeters longer than the E175, allowing for an additional row of seats. When it comes to the competition, the Airbus A220-100's capacity sits between the E190 and E195, while the A220-300's maximum capacity allows for 15 more passengers than the largest E-jet. And so when it comes to popular regional aircraft available, the E175 best competes with the CRJ-900, which was produced by Bombardier before Japanese firm Mitsubishi purchased the program and ended production. This means that the E175-E2, if it were to be produced, would have few major in-production rivals. The Comac C909, formerly ARJ-21, would be the closest. But the fact is that the E175-E2 is currently not being produced. The program and development of the variant was suspended in February 2022. So, for today's video, let's examine why this happened and what options are available to Embraer from here on out. One small note before we begin, we may refer to the original E175 aircraft as the E1 to better distinguish it from the newer E2. However, the official naming of this older generation aircraft is simply E175. And so, yes, it was about 3 years ago that Embraer announced that it was going to be pausing flight testing and certification of its E175-E2. At the time of the announcement, the company said that it would be a 3-year pause, and so perhaps any day now we might get an update on the fate of this jet. But going back to its 2022 announcement, the manufacturer had this to say as the reason for its decision. As in previous years, the reprogramming of activities is associated with the ongoing US mainline scope clause discussions with the pilot unions regarding the maximum takeoff weight or MTOW limitation for aircraft with up to 76 seats, together with current global market conditions for commercial aviation and the continuing interest in the current E175 jet in the US market. Embraer then said that it, quote, expects to resume the program development activities following the aforementioned period, which will result in a reprogramming of the aircraft entry into service between 2027 and 2028. And so the E175-E2's development was paused not because of technological or manufacturing difficulties, but primarily due to limitations set by pilots' unions, which have severely limited the jet's appeal in the US market. By the way, if you want a full explainer video on the scope clause, why it exists, and how it impacts air operations, be sure to check out our video on the subject. As highlighted by Aviation Week, Embraer had launched the E175-E2 assuming that scope clause, which limits the use of large regional aircraft in the US, would change in time for the arrival of the aircraft. Currently, and for the foreseeable future, pilots of regional airlines operating on behalf of US major carriers cannot fly aircraft that have more than 76 seats or weigh more than 86,000 pounds. And so the E175-E2's maximum takeoff weight of more than 98,000 pounds exceeds scope clause limitations by around 10%. Yes, it's a heavier aircraft with only slightly higher capacity than its predecessor, but it is a more efficient aircraft due to its newer generation engines. But with little hope of scope clauses being changed, Embraer executives have expressed mixed feelings about the company's future product strategy in the United States. Speaking during Embraer's Investor Day in New York on November 18, 2024, the head of its commercial aviation division, Ariane Meyer, admitted that he does not see any changes coming to scope clauses in the short-term future. However, Mayer praised the E175-E1, which has performed quite well to date. Indeed, this is one big reason why airlines are reluctant to push the changes in its agreements with pilot unions. Mayer admitted that the improvements of the E2 simply may not have been enticing enough for US carriers, telling investors it was not enough for airlines to say, "Okay, let's go through the hassle to change the scope clause to get the E175-E2." Nevertheless, the US remains an essential market for Embraer. The company's president and CEO Francisco Gomez Neto stated, "The US is one of the most important markets for Embraer, and we see a lot of opportunities to grow our presence in the US even further." Neto said that the company predicts sales of up to 300 E175-E1 jets in the next 10 years, adding that there is an excellent opportunity for the E2 aircraft family to fill the gap between regional jets and larger narrow-bodies. And while we haven't heard any definitive news regarding the resumption of E175-E2 flight testing and certification, we do know that Embraer hasn't completely given up on the jet. At the 2024 edition of the Farnborough Air Show, the company unveiled improvements to the aircraft, including larger overhead bins and mood lighting, multi-band satellite connectivity, Recaro seats, and next-generation weather and data avionics. At the same time, it was stated that the E175-E1 would be receiving a set of upgrades as well. The improvements available to customers upon request focus on the cabin and passenger experience, as well as updating some avionics to be more in line with the E2's. Embraer noted that the E175's overhead luggage bin capacity will double in size to be similar to those on the E2. Seating options and data transfer solutions and weather radar will also be upgraded to match the capabilities of the E2. And so it looks like Embraer isn't holding its breath when it comes to getting the E175-E2 into the US market, and is instead trying its best to make the E1 variant more appealing. It makes a lot of sense with US airlines still ordering the older generation. In March 2024, American Airlines Group placed a firm order for 90 E175s with purchase rights for 43 additional jets. The aircraft are slated to be delivered with 76 seats in America's standard dual-class configuration. The year prior, in October, Embraer sold 19 new E175s to SkyWest for operation in the United Airlines network, adding to the 90 E175 jet SkyWest already operates for the Star Alliance carrier. That announcement came days after American Airlines signed a firm order with Embraer for 4 new E175s to be operated by American's wholly owned subsidiary, Envoy Air. And so, when you consider the original E175's continued appeal, it truly appears that its E2 replacement was developed prematurely, with misplaced hopes that the US scope clause situation would have been adjusted by now. So, what do you think of Embraer and its E175-E2 situation? Should it go ahead and resume testing and certification with hopes that the scope clause will eventually change, while also focusing on sales outside the US market? Or should it just give up and redirect its efforts elsewhere while trying to make further improvements to the E1? Let us know what you think by leaving a comment. Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com.